Order. We'll waive the pledge to the flag, and we'll do that before our regular council meeting. So we'll do the roll call and pledge to the flag during our regular council meeting, and just move forward to the workshop. Tonight we have Don Jutton from Municipal Resources, one of the organizations who've been so kind as to offer us the opportunity to consider them in our search for a town manager. Mr. Jutton?
Thanks. Good evening to you all.
Thank you.
I'm Don Jutton. I'm the president of Municipal Resources. It's a company that is about 24 years old. I am a recovering town manager. I spent the first half of my career as a public manager in New Hampshire and Salem, which is about 22 miles outside of Boston, and in Meredith, which is where our office is now. And I picked the nicer of the two places to live. Meredith is up on Winnipesaukee, and Salem is just close to Boston. We've been consulting to towns and cities and school districts throughout the Northeast. Our primary focus is New England, but we have an office in Pennsylvania. We do work in New York, New Jersey, and Maryland as well. And we do all forms of things for communities of populations of about 35 to 50,000 or less. Our expertise is really in municipal operations as opposed to big city government and operations. We know how to make small towns work. We do virtually everything that a small town needs to do. Interim town management, police chief, fire chief, public works operations. We have a tax assessing division where we do tax assessing for 22 towns in New Hampshire and Maine. We do a lot of recruitments, wage and classification studies, and so forth. We have 17 full-time staff people, and then we have another 24 retired or semi-retired folks with particular subject expertise. We do recruitments. We're in the process. We have 7 active recruitments at the moment, plus one that will hopefully wrap up on this Friday. We do them throughout New England. We have a very deliberate process. It takes a bit longer than some communities like. However, we're convinced that the old adage, decide in haste and repent in leisure, is a good adage to follow. We place a tremendous amount of emphasis on the front end. We want to understand what you need. We believe that every community has a personality. You have a specific set of needs for the manager coming through the door. We'll try to understand what those needs are for the first 3 to 5 years. We believe that no one fits a job perfectly, so we try to help you hire what we call manageable deficits, making sure that the person's strengths fit your specific needs and that their shortcomings are compensated for elsewhere in the organization. So, for example, if we have a manager who is not terribly strong in finance, if you have a strong finance person, then we don't worry about that. But if you have come out of a financial crisis, that's probably not the person to fit your organization. We believe that you should hire integrity and character with fundamental competence. But it's all about fit. People get hired because of their experience, because of their education, and how well they do in the interview. Nobody's ever gotten in trouble for any of those things. Managers get in trouble for how they do what they do. And so we spend a lot of time trying to understand what you need, understand the personality of your community, the culture of your organization, and then we'll bring you people who have the competence and people whose style, personality, and character we believe fits. We prefer to work with groups, interview panels. Our typical interview process will be 2 steps. We will interview in the community with a citizens panel, a professional panel, and an employee panel. We'll train and prepare them up front. And then from that group, we bring those 6 people into town, and then from that group, we'll bring back at least 3 for you all to interview. We handle everything from the front end, so we'll meet with each of you. We'll do a survey, community survey of your staff, of you all, And in some communities, they actually want to do the community. Other communities don't want to. We're happy to do it either way. It's an online survey. From that, we will develop an ideal candidate profile and a challenge statement. So we will put into words what we think the skill sets are that are necessary to be successful in the job, get you to buy off, prepare a challenge statement which articulates the issues and concerns and challenges that this person is going to be looking at for the first 3 to 5 years. And then get you to sign off on that, and we post that. We'll identify places to post. The form of government in New England is so unique that many communities want to stick to advertising New England. We typically recommend ICMA, which is the Managers Association, and that's pretty much where most of our candidates will come from. We will also list on all of the league. You have Maine Municipal, we have New Hampshire, Connecticut, Vermont, all have leagues. We'll post on their websites. Because we do so many recruitments, we have an active database of folks who are in the marketplace, and so we'll also dig through that based upon what your needs are. So if you have a particularly challenging financial problem, you're looking to create a TIF district, you've got a huge bond coming up, we may cross-reference and look for somebody who's got those skills and who has those abilities. We know, just because we do so many other things beside recruitment represents about 15% of our work, but we do a lot of them. But we know who's in the marketplace, who's looking, who just had a board elected that doesn't think they're doing such a wonderful job. There's a lot of retreads in the business, but there are also a lot of people. This is a profession that sometimes it's good to be fired, for lack of a better description, given controversies and issues that occur in the communities. We will help you prepare and update your job description if that's something you want, but we don't necessarily have to do that. We receive and acknowledge all resumes. We recommend that you advertise, or you allow us to advertise in confidence. That typically expands the pool by about 15%. When you advertise, the reality is that only one person's going to get the job, and I'm not likely to apply if the folks back home are going to find out that I've applied and I don't love them anymore. So we'll advertise in confidence. We review and rank them. We establish a professional panel of ex-managers to review and rank the resumes against the ideal candidate profile. We'll make a cut. It's usually 25 to 30%. In the last 5 or 6 years since the economy has been down, we see a lot of non-traditional applicants, bankers, lawyers, Indian chiefs, and so we will kind of cull out those folks who have no shot at the position. We'll then send a written essay questionnaire to the top candidates. We'll form those questions and get you to sign off on them, but they're typically questions related to your community, specific issues or challenges here. We'll send that out, review it and rank it. At that point, we'll make another cut. We'll then do an internet search to try to identify skeletons in closets. We tell all of the candidates, once we get beyond that point, that they're going to be subject to an in-depth background investigation. Part of our contract with you will be a background investigation, and we use a full police-style background, which includes financial background, records check, criminal check, motor vehicle, and references. And if you desire, we'll actually put people on the ground in the neighborhood where those people are from. We'll review and rank the essays. We do the internet search. Then we will do a telephone interview with the top 10 or 15 candidates. At that point, we do a sanity check. Do you know what cold is? I mean, we have a lot of people who apply from outside of New England who haven't seen snow. What were the circumstances surrounding leaving your last job? One of the standards that we set, there have been a lot in the last 10 years. It's very fashionable for managers and communities to part ways signing confidentiality agreements. We insist, unless you tell us otherwise, that anybody who has signed an agreement to leave the employment, they send us a written explanation of why, and we tell them if they are selected as the finalists, they're going to have to sign a release to allow us to interview in the community. I mean, you don't want to hire somebody else's nightmare. And the problem with this business is everybody is so lawsuit conscious that they tend to kind of send the problem down the road. Our job is to make sure that problem doesn't become your problem. We also have feel a strong moral obligation to the individuals. We don't want to place somebody in a community where they're going to fail. For you, it's a pain and it's expensive. For them, it may be a life-changing event, particularly if it requires relocation. And so we spend a lot of time on that interview, telephone interview, sanity check kind of discussion. Are you ready for this? Do you have the skills necessary for this? What kind of research have you done? We see lots of types of candidates, but typically we break them into two categories. Those people who want a job and those people who want this job. And we try to sort those things out. And so it doesn't mean that somebody who's desperate can't make a good manager, but sometimes people will come in an interview and say anything they think you want to hear in order to get the job, and then you regret it for a long time. We'll work with you to set a series of measurable goals and objectives, which we propose that you incorporate any kind of an employment agreement, so you have some measure to look at how if they are successful, and if they're not, why not? We try to align expectations. One of the things that's always challenging is there are 7 or 8 of you. That's 7 or 8 different opinions, and so managers come in all different colors and styles, and some are outside people, promotional, community, economic development types. Some are green eye shade inside bean counters. If 3 of you want a bean counter and 4 of you want a promoter or economic development person, once a year we're going to have this clash. And so there needs to be an alignment of those expectations and establishment of priorities. We'll assist with a development of a conditional offer of employment. We strongly recommend that you use that kind of a process where you make the offer subject to a background investigation that is satisfactory to you, reference checks, and then medical exam, so that you're not buying a physical problem or somebody else's damaged goods. Process will take 90 to 120 days to complete comfortably. If you buy we often compete against the leagues. Every one of the leagues in New England offers recruitment service. If all you want is the recruitment process, we'll provide that. If you buy a comprehensive package, which includes everything we do, we'll provide an 18-month guarantee. If that person doesn't work out for anything other than a change in the majority of the council or serious illness or death, we'll complete the process at no charge. So that's what we do. We're very good at what we do. We're happy to give you references. And we also have some fun when we're doing it.
Any questions from council?
Jim Bennett works with you, right?
Microphone.
Say,
Jim Bennett works with you, right?
yes. Please don't hold that against me. I'm only kidding.
He was a neighbor.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Everybody knows Jim. Yeah, he is. I expect that there will come a day when he joins us on a full-time basis. But you never know. He's a hard guy to pin down sometimes.
When we first started talking about looking for, and I apologize for my cough, and I'm getting over a cold. When we first started talking about looking for someone to help us do this search, you used some of the keywords that we were thinking of in terms of process and the kind of person you're looking for. When you meet with council to talk about the sorts of things that we're looking for, what sorts of questions do you typically ask?
Well, we'll start with a survey. And typical questions are, what are the 5 or 6 biggest issues that the community is facing in the next 3 to 5 years? We'll provide a kind of a hit list of all of the services that the community provides and ask people to kind of rate it from exceptional to ho-hum. We'll ask, Another question is, you know, if you could, money not being an issue, because money is an issue everywhere, money not being an issue, if you could make 3 changes that would dramatically improve this organization, what would they be? Another one is, if you could whisper something in the new town manager's ear anonymously to help ensure that he or she is successful, what would you say? And so what we're really trying to find out is what's on the mind of the community. We'll interview you. We want to know what's the personality of the community. I mean, some communities have really great personalities. People care about one another. It's easy. Some communities, politics is a recreational blood sport. In some communities, people go away in the morning and come back at night, and there's 5% of the population cares. In other communities, it's very participatory, and there are 97 boards and committees, and people are involved in everything. So we need to understand what's the personality of this community, what's the character of the community. Where do you see the community going? What are the big issues and challenges that you face? And then we'll try to work real hard to make sure that we find candidates who have the technical skills. But as I said, there's a baseline of competence to run a municipality. For us, the really important thing is the character of the individual, the integrity of the individual, style and approach. You know, some people are analytical and tend to be not necessarily difficult to work with, but not warm and cuddly. In some communities, that's perfect. In other communities, they want somebody who's approachable, somebody who's involved in the community, somebody they enjoy being with. And so you can get the right skill set, but the wrong personality and be in a lot of trouble. So we try to understand what those issues are going to be. And that's one of the reasons we propose, and we like to use the interview panels. We think that you get a lot of bang for your buck. The individual starts off with some relationships in the community, and that's critically important. This is a tough job. The learning curve, if you're coming in from away, from outside the community, it's going to take you 12 to 18 months to figure out who's on first. And so you've got 40 to 60, 70 hours a week, plus potentially a family at home with youngsters starting in a new school, with a spouse who may have changed to a new job or who may be looking for a new job. And so you have to feel guilty if you're not at the office taking care of business, and if you're at the office, you're feeling guilty you're not home tending to the family's needs. So as an example, if you're paying someone to relocate, especially from outside of the state, we'll encourage that you do a family visit. That you dedicate a weekend, we'll coordinate it. But bring the family here, we'll work up front so that if there are children involved, perhaps they can meet the teacher. We can have some kids from the class they'll be going in so that they can form some friends and they're not as apprehensive about coming to the community. If the spouse has a profession or a career, we'll try to hook them up with people in that business so that they understand. We'll try to set up something social so that they have a chance to meet the community, time with a realtor to get a feel for the real estate market and housing costs. We try to sort out, as an example, if children have special needs. Frankly, the northern 3 states in New England are not a great place if you have children with special needs. We don't commit a lot of money to that. So if you have a child with real special needs, it might be a disaster to move and then discover that you can't get the services that you need for the kids. So we'll try to sort those things out beforehand so that there aren't surprises.
How broad of advertisement are you going to be doing? I mean, you're talking about bringing someone in that could be further south. I mean, we're talking, you could be going across the states advertising this? Is it by newspaper or online?
Typically, it's all online anymore, but we advertise in ICMA, which is international. Occasional, I mean, we'll get applications from abroad, but I mean, that's not something that plays out. More as an example, Friday I'm doing interviews in Lenox, Mass, and we've got a candidate who's coming in from Kansas, but her roots are here. She started out as an assistant in Connecticut, migrated to get her first manager's job, and she was desperate to get back. If you've been to Kansas, you probably understand that. So in any event, there are, and particularly Maine. I mean, Maine is the University of Maine, Orono, was one of the earliest schools of public administration. And so you have a lot of students that you've trained shipped away, and folks are, more and more, they're anxious to get back to the East Coast. I mean, we've got the colleges
Yep.
in Boston, the hospitals, and all those kinds of things. So we'll see a lot of applications from outside the region. And again, depending on what your needs are, you know, you may find, if you have a specific or a unique set of needs, Brunswick as an example, or Portsmouth, New Hampshire, when the base is closed, there aren't a lot of people in the world with those kinds of skill sets.
Right.
So we might go out and look for those kinds of things. But by and large, you will not be seeing from us, you know, somebody who is the city manager of Annapolis, Maryland. I mean, there's not a lot of.
Right.
And so we'll look, and again, we want to understand, it's easier, in our view, it's easier to manage up than it is to manage down. And by that I mean that if you're a small town manager, you have to do almost everything, including clean the bathrooms. If you move up a level, it's easy to say, oh, well, I can delegate that to a custodian. Didn't used to have one of those, but at least now I know what he has to do. And so, and communities in New England tend to manage in 3 tiers. You have the really small communities, or the communities that manage small, and you have kind of the mid-size, and then you have the large ones. And frankly, the real large ones are outside of our wheelhouse. The larger ones tend to be managed through politics rather than through operational expertise. And that doesn't mean the people there in the staff are not operational experts, but politics plays a much more significant role in decision-making, and that's not our expertise.
Yep. Yep.
Earlier, you had mentioned about the interview process with the different panels. Could you revisit that, explain
Sure.
that one more time?
Sure, we would, assuming you buy into that notion and you want to do that,
Yeah.
we would suggest that you put a notice in the newspaper indicating that the council is interested in receiving names, or we're interested, however you choose to do it, of individuals who would like to sit on a panel to assist with the interview of the managers. We look for 5, 7, sometimes 8 people. Ask them to send in a letter and give us a little bit of information about their background. We look for a cross-section. We try to get a cross-section of the community. There needs to be a place at the table for the naysayers, for the soccer moms, for the religious community, for the school community. We've had a lot of success in communities getting a couple of high school students involved. They kind of changed the dynamic, and the questions and concerns that they have are very different than, you know, the taxpayer kind of questions. What are you going to do to keep our taxes down? They really don't care. So we'll advertise for that. And again, it depends upon the nature of the community, whether some communities we have, they say right now, as an example, the Board of Selectmen in Lenox picked the panel. So they told us, these are the folks you're going to work with. In Killingly, Connecticut right now, they sent their names directly to us. We sorted them out, and we picked 7 out of 12 or 13. So it depends upon the community. Some communities tell us we don't want any part of that. I mean, Bedford, New Hampshire said, we got elected to make the decision. We don't want any input. Okay with us, but there's a price to pay no matter what you do. Same thing with employees. We suggested it be a cross-section, not just department heads, but a cross-section of people. Some folks who are brand new, some people who have been around a long, long time, some people who have to roll up their sleeves and work in the mud, as opposed to people who sit behind a desk. If you have unions, someone who represents the union. Kind of the key from our perspective is that the process be transparent, so that the community feels like, even though they may not agree with who you picked, they feel like it was done on the up and up.
Yep.
And then we'll bring in a professional panel of 3 or 4 of our folks. One is to interact with the other panels, but also to kind of press a little bit in terms of the technical skill sets to do the operation.
So really, the applicant would go through 4 different panels: community, and then staff, and then your panel, and then the council.
Yeah, but you're not a panel. You are the deciders.
Well, they go through 4 different groups.
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
4 different groups.
Yeah.
They go through a number of hurdles.
Yeah.
The first is just send us your resume. Then you have to answer 5 essay questions. We'll lose 4 or 5 people at that level. That's kind of a lot like heavy lifting if you're just fishing.
Yeah.
And so, you know, but it also gives us those essays give us an opportunity to, one, see how they think about issues that are critical to you, but also see, can they link 2 words in a sentence? You know, what are those skills? And again, that's not, wouldn't necessarily disqualify somebody because they have a hard time writing, but you want to know that, this is probably not going to be your grants writer if that's the person, or it's probably not going to be the person who writes the annual report without some assistance.
Great. Anything else from council?
How many applicants do you foresee that we could possibly get? Ballpark.
Always wrong. You have a residency requirement?
No.
Not absolute, no. Not absolute.
Okay, but you have a preference, yeah, as long as you don't have. I'd say we'll have somewhere between 50 and 70.
Wow, really?
So it makes
Yeah,
sense
but-
to have that sort of narrowing it down process.
Say again?
It makes sense to have that narrowing down
Yeah,
process.
well, bear in mind that of that 50, 60% are going to be folks who want a job. And they don't care whether it's town manager or running the hardware store, they want a job. And you'll have some percentage of folks who think that running a town is easy. And so, maybe, I didn't think it was, but it might be, if you have the right skills, I just didn't have them. But the issue is that you'll get folks from the banking industry, the insurance industry, and, impressive credentials. We're seeing a lot more lawyers. We probably have an average of 5 lawyers per recruitment process at this point. Most of them without any relevant experience, but being a lawyer is tough business best at times, and we just keep churning them out of school, so there's a lot of them out there. A lot of people from the kind of the financial industry world, just because of what's happened with the economy. Maine is a little unique. You're awfully big, in case no one's told you. And so but you have a lot of managers. So my guess is, and you tend to be, the state tends to be parochial in terms of choosing people. That's, to some extent, that's a story consistent in almost every state. Every state that we work in kind of thinks that they're different. I come back to the notion that you hire integrity and character, get the basic fundamental skills, and everything else will fit. If you can run a town, whether you're running it in Maine or New Hampshire or Vermont or Connecticut, it's a set of rules. The rule book is not so dramatically different. It's based upon the U.S. Constitution, a whole bunch of federal laws. There are subtle differences, but not so much that I would argue you could or you should exclusively stick to people with experience in the state.
What is the big difference between your organization and other organizations that we could partner with for this search? Is there one thing in particular that your organization does that others don't?
Creativity, integrity, and I'd make this kind of a broad brush statement that one of the reasons it's comparatively easy for us to compete with all of the municipal leagues is that they're membership organizations, and so that they have to have a loyalty to their members, and so in-state candidates typically are members.
Yeah.
And so we don't have any loyalty to anybody but you and the candidates.
Yeah.
And we bring that integrity to the table. We have done a lot of these. We've probably done more than anybody else in New England. Our reputation, all you need to do is check. We get stellar references from any place. That we won't promise not to screw up, because we do a lot. But when you hear us say oops, you can count on one, we'll fix it, and we won't kick anything under the rug. So, we've got I'll give you a couple of references. Lenox and Cromwell, Connecticut we're back on a second time because the process didn't go the way it was intended to go, and it had nothing to do with us. It was political decisions made in the community. Cromwell, Connecticut boards are partisan, and there's a state statute in Connecticut which requires a minority representation. And so, as sad as it is, sometimes partisan politics insinuate itself into decision-making. And so, down there, the chairman, what's called a first selectman, came out of a meeting and said, in spite of 5 votes for the person, said this person can't possibly succeed, and shared those views with the newspaper. And the candidate said, That's not the way I want to start my career here. So, in the case of Lennox, it was just kind of bad judgment on the part of an individual board member who met one-on-one with a candidate and proceeded to tell him what he expected would be done by the end of the first year. And we'll try to coach you with that. I mean, there's no right or wrong, and we're not the council police. And so, you know, we'll within reason, we'll do what you all want to do, but we'll give you recommendations as to what not to do, what to do and what not to do. We try to stay involved through the first round of negotiations, so we kind of make sure that that we have an agreement in principle, not necessarily the details, and then get that individual to the table. You all have to speak with one mind, which is sometimes tough to do when you have more than one person. And sometimes things that get said tip things one way or another. And so we'll work with you. We believe there are very few right and wrongs in this world. It's just consequences. And so we'll give you our best recommendation, and then we'll follow along with, if you decide you want to go in another direction, we'll do our best to make that work.
Great. Anything else?
How do you deal with like salary requirements for a manager in terms of like their expectations versus our expectations of what we can pay?
We'll do that right up front. We'll do a survey, and we'll come back and we'll tell you this is what your competition looks like. And you can tell us, you know, and again, there's no right or wrong, it's just consequences. And so if you're in a $125,000 market and you want to pay $107,000, we'll find you. I mean, I can find you a town manager or a public manager for $50,000 if you want. You may be happy, you may be unhappy at the end of the year, but so the issue really becomes not is there a right or a wrong, it's what are the parameters. You know, we'll have some conversations. I try to get to a point that has you imagine what's that number that you're prepared to watch the best possible candidate walk away. Also, there are numbers that will predispose a manager to failure. There are some communities where the median family income or the issue of income is a big deal in the community. So even though you may be willing to pay somebody $125,000, that may doom that person to failure in the eyes of the community. We're paying somebody we can't afford $125,000, so that person starts behind the eight ball before they even start. And so we'll share that with a person. Better you not take a job and fail. That's our biggest concern, is the person's going to fail. And so the whole bunch of reasons why people will fail, but it's never how well they do in the interview or their education and experience. And so we'll try to identify those things and make sure that expectations are aligned. We try not to advertise a specific dollar amount, but we'll put in, with your permission, we'll put in the ad what the current manager is making. Housing is a big deal. It has had a profound impact on recruiting in the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, people don't have confidence they can sell their home where they are, and they don't have confidence they can get a mortgage someplace else. So it used to be the reverse. I mean, now it's very different. And again, we'll know that right up front. We'll understand, I mean, we won't intimately understand your housing market, but we'll have a rough idea of what it is. Because if someone's coming, even if they're from New England, if they're living in Ohio in a beautiful 4-bedroom Garrison and they can sell it for $150,000, they may not be able to, you know, replace that with a mobile home in your community. And so why create all of that angst for you and for them only to find out that that can't happen?
Anything else from council? Well, personally, thank you, Dawn, for coming in. It was, for me, I wanted to talk with all of the different 8 organizations, because by no means am I or is anybody on the council an expert when it comes to the search for a new manager. And we're going to rely on, you know, an organization very heavily to help us get through this, get the best manager possible. And I really appreciate you coming in this evening.
So your job is to get the best organization possible, and that's us.
That's right.
There you go.
We're going to try.
As long as you understand that, we won't have any problems at all.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, you too.
We'll do that during the council meeting.
So just motion.
You don't have to, it's not official, you can just adjourn.
We will adjourn the workshop at this time.
Sorry about that. I don't think my coffee medicine had kicked in yet.